So I just left shift this morning at the beginning of my 4-day. And for those of you not familiar with what I'm referring to, a 24-48 schedule that's modified. What we work every 3 weeks essentially. After we work Thursday, we get Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and Monday off. So pretty nice. Takes a while to get calmed down and back to earth. But I do just want to come on and talk a little. But real quick, I just want to talk about ADHD and work. So essentially, what I feel like ADHD is for me is like having 43 internet pages open, and one of them is playing music, and you can't find the one that's playing music. It is forgetting to make a plan for something such as a cookout or whatever until the last minute or the day of, forgetting to pay a bill, forgetting to budget, forgetting to clean your mess up off the table because you got sidetracked doing something else. It's not. I think a common misconception about ADHD is that you're running around here like the Tasmanian devil, which is true to an extent, but it's not in that way. It's more so, you're eating lunch and you have 1,000 things that you didn't say no to get done, and you got sidetracked because you're in a hurry, because you're behind like always, and you leave it on the table. And then your wife finds it and says something to you about it. It's that kind of stuff. It's signing up to do things when you know good and well you have other things you need to do, but you can't tell anybody no, and you just fill your day up with crap. And I think the constant looking for something to do, the constant something I mentioned to my wife earlier this week was I was just unnecessarily busy. There was things that I have done or had planned to do this week that was just, something that I could have spent my time better doing. I have 1,000 things to do at my house. It's a little bit more important than going and doing something elsewhere, but here I am doing the other things. And it's not like it's a huge deal, but in our current situation, we're redoing our house and we just got a lot going on. So it's been about 2.5 weeks now, and things are taking way longer than they ought to, which I would say is half my fault, because I have this plan in my head and we're going to do X, Y, Z, and I give her instructions like this is how we're going to do it, this, and this, we're going to get this done, yada yada yada, and it's all good. Well, when it comes time to execute, it just don't happen. I get a lot of people who say, or I hear people who tell other people that, why don't you just stick with one thing? Why don't you just pick something and just stick with it and be done with it? And that's cool, except it just don't work that way. It's almost like a physical feeling inside of you that it's like this. The best way I can describe, at least how my experience with ADHD is that there's a door, and I'm walking into the door, and I'm just glitching. Like this. There's just a feeling here that whatever I'm doing is just like I can physically feel this mountain, this door I'm hitting constantly. That it's just not enough. There's whatever I'm doing at that current moment is just not enough. My job's not enough. These side quests I do all the time aren't enough. I'm just looking for a constant filler to get that hit of dopamine, get that satisfaction that I'm doing something that's going to make some kind of difference. And it's just not enough. So that constant, and now I'm washing cars, mobile detailing, or I'm taking videos and photos, or I'm mowing somebody's grass, or whatever it is for the day, for the week, that's cool because, you know, I've seen a video on Facebook. There's this bird walking down this hallway, and there's a little yellow dot, and it's a white bird. And the bird walks by the dot the first time, and then the second time it comes back and it hits the yellow dot, and it turns yellow and sends it off into space, doing twirls and twists and all that kind of stuff, and comes back down. And, you know, he slows down walking again, he turns back white, and he sees the yellow dot, and he hits it again and goes back up and gets high and comes back down. It's just this constant back and forth and back and forth. But that's kind of how it is. It's like you find something cool to do, and you're the best person to do the job. You know, you're the perfectionist at it for a week or two, and then you come back down and it's not enough, and you find something else. So, oh, you know, this is cool, let me do this, and it's back up in there you go, and back down you come, and it's just like a constant revolving cycle, and it's just never enough. And, you know, there's medical explanations for that. The high functioning, well, I say high functioning, the people who, everybody exhibits symptoms from ADHD symptoms. You know, it's just a matter of how good you can function and how well you can manage. And some people can do it well, and some people can't hack it. And I'm just one of the people that can't hack it. It's just, you know, and it's frustrating. It's extremely frustrating to deal with. You know, I'm not medicated. I have my own opinion about, you know, big pharma and all this other things. Long story anyway. But, you know, it's getting to the point now that it's just, you're at that borderline of, you got to do something. You know, this is just, it's exhausting. It's physically and mentally exhausting to keep up with my own self, and having to deal with the shame of, you know, not necessarily not pleasing other people, but disappointing other people, I guess. Or just knowing that you could have did better. Like, sometimes things aren't a big deal, but it's like, you know, imagine that, you know. And then people, you know, it gets to the point where people don't expect anything less from you because how you are historically for years and years and years, you know. For me, it's just last minute, you know. I get up late at work, I get to work right on time, there's no in between everywhere I go. I mean, I push it to the limit all the time. And, you know, is that necessarily a bad thing? You know, it just depends. It's all this is so subjective. You know, if I didn't have any responsibilities, if I didn't have a full-time job, shift work job, you know, if I worked alone in my house, whatever, it probably wouldn't matter. You know, but when it gets to the point to where, you know, you are taking too many jobs at one time and doing things for too many people, and including yourself, trying to be a husband and a dad, and, you know, you've got all these irons in fire. You know, you need to go get your kids and spend time with your kids. You need to spend time with your wife. You need to go mow your grass. You need to, you know, see your siblings. You need to, you have all these plans in your head. You know, the problem is that the short term, or you can't get to the long term. You know, like, for instance, I spoke to my wife and said, you know, we need to get prepared for school, and instead of waiting till the last minute, like typically what happens, you know, she's freaking out, and I'm like, yeah, whatever, you know, it's fine. It's fine. We do this every year. But it's, you know, for her, it's extremely aggravating. Now, we've been together long enough, she just deals with it, you know, but that's just one of those things, like, but why? You know, why? It's July, they go back in a month. Why not just have everything ready, so when it gets to that point where open house is here and it's time to go again for 180 more days, why aren't you just ready? Why do you have to spend the last minute in Walmart with all the people in this crazy place shopping? Why not just be ready? And the only thing you need to get is that, you know, specific list that you get at open house. You know, the beach. Why don't you know, every year you want to go to the beach, and you say, oh, we're going to the beach, or we're going to do X, Y, and Z, and here it is, you know, a week or two before you go to the beach, and you ain't got the first hotel room, you ain't made the first plans, you don't have nothing ready to go, you know. And, you know, it ends up working most of the time, but it's chaotic. It is a freaking mess. It's aggravating, and it's not nowhere near relaxing. It's just chaotic. But it's like you thrive in the chaos. Like, that is chaotic is normal for you. I worked in the 911 center for several years, and I worked in more than one 911 center at one time for several years. I would leave one my full time, and I'd go to part time and do it. And I would leave there and go to the fire station, and I would leave the fire station, and I'd go back to the 911 center, and then maybe I'd go home for 12 hours and sleep and get it up and do it again. You know, that was my life for a significant amount of time, and even up to this point, you know, and everybody does it around me. You know, you work your full-time fire department job, or you leave and you go part-time at another fire station, and then you leave there and go to another fire station, and you go back to another fire station, and you come back to your full-time job, and you might go home, you might not, or you might mow all day, and you might come home, eat dinner, and go to sleep, and back 24. I mean, I just talked to a guy off shift this morning. He ain't been to his house since Sunday, and it's today's Friday. You know, we just got off this morning. So imagine being gone for 4 days voluntarily or ish. You know, like, who signs up to do that? Like, what are you doing? I mean, it's almost like we've signed up to a military contract, you know, and we're going on tour, except we're going on tour like 20, 30 minutes away from the house, but we just can't get home, you know, and it's where we are in this four-walled war zone where we, you know, have running calls, and we're not sleeping at night, and we're eating fast food, and we're barely exercising. Maybe you exercise, and we're training, and we're doing public education programs, and we're doing documentation on the computer. We're doing instructing training nights. We're checking trucks off and cleaning them and cleaning up the station, and it's I mean, your day is slammed full of just stuff every single day, and then you go home and you don't know how to act. You know, your brain is like, you know, like, what are you doing? Why are you here? Why are you not doing something? It's just that feel you have an overwhelming feeling when you come home, and it's because it's not chaotic. It's not, you don't have 1,000 things going on at one time, you know, and you don't want to be there. I honestly think there's a lot of people that works in emergency services who pick up all these jobs because it's so easy, right? I mean, everybody's like, oh, we got a great schedule, we got all these days off, yada yada yada. But, you know, we've got all these days off, but, you know, we've got all these days off, but you feel them all the time doing something, you know, because you're looking for that constant feeling of the dopamine. I guess that's what they say. It's what we lack. You're looking for that constant need to do something, that constant feeling of somebody needing you, that you're important, that you need to provide for somebody, and there's calm and chaos. You know, normal people would look at you and your job and what you're doing in your life and be like, you're stupid. You know, like, there's, you know, why don't you take a day off? Why don't you go home? Why don't you ride a bike? Why don't you walk a trail? Why don't you spend time with your kids? Why don't you do whatever it is you're doing? And you're like, no thanks, you know. And it's not intentional. You know, you make up some excuse in your head, well, if I work an extra couple hours, I will be able to have extra money at the beach. Or, you know, we just got this car and I do this. So there's no excuse. And this is a whole nother series that I could talk about, I plan on doing. But like, when you get a job, you know, obviously there's a salary aspect to your job. You knew what you were getting when you got the job. You know, if your lifestyle can't afford that job, then why did you get the job? You know, or you need to tone down your lifestyle so you can work one job and have it sustained. Because what happens when you get hurt? What happens when you can't work? You know, what happens for those of you with stay-at-home moms or stay-at-home dads, or even single households? You know, I guess that's one thing, because you don't have a lot of people depending on you if you're by yourself. But at the same time, like, why do we put ourselves in a position that we have to work every single day? You know, we have a fantastic schedule. We miss a lot of events that are important, but at the same time, we're also off a lot. You know, I work one day, have 2 days off. Every 3 weeks, I get 4 days off, a Friday, Saturday, Sunday. I mean, I can take a vacation and never take a day off. I can just leave the Friday morning, come back Monday evening, and never miss a beat. Or I could take, a Wednesday off and have from Monday morning to Friday off. Most people got to burn 40 hours. I just had to burn 24. So there's perks to this job. There ain't a whole lot of them, but there is perks. But what I'm saying is we constantly fill those void spaces with things to do. I remember several years ago, I had a Google Calendar that I would print out, and I would sign up to work at part-time at fire departments or communication centers. And I was at my full-time job at the time at the 911 center, and I laid out my calendar. And pretty much when you sign up to work most fire departments part-time, it's like a lottery. You put down what days that you're available to work, whether it's daytime, nighttime, 24, and you turn your time in to whoever does that schedule. Well, when they do the schedule, everybody usually does it at a particular time of the month, like the 15th or something. Well, you turn all your days in, and then they do the schedule. A couple days later, you find out what days you work. Well, I work several different fire departments, and so one schedule would come out, and I'm like, okay, I'm working my full-time job these days, I'm working this part-time job these days, so I now have these days remaining. So let me give these rest of these days to this other fire department or this other 911 agency. So you got to go do it again, and I give the other person my schedule, and they do their schedule, and I add more days to my calendar. So much so to, there's like 336, 340 hours in a month, and I work like 200 of them. Probably more than that, probably 300 of them. Like I had maybe, there's times I've had a day or two off an entire month. And anyway, my supervisor at the time, or I think it was supervisor. Anyway, my buddy came up to me and says, "What is that?" I said, "This is my calendar." He said, "That's not a calendar, that's organized chaos." And ever since then, I named my Google Calendar Organized Chaos, or Organized Torture. That's what I call it. Organized Torture. That's what he said. And that's the truth, because that's exactly what we do. Everything that we do, it is organized torture, because we know where we got to be, when we got to be there, and we follow the structure day in and day out. And then you go home, and there is no structure. There is, kids run around. There's dishes in the sink. The bathroom filthy. There's blankets in the living room where they're huddled up on the couch watching movies all night long. They've been playing video games. They're just all over the place. And if you went to work, the first thing you do when you go to work is you clean. You clean, you check off the trucks, you wash the trucks, you blow out the bay. I mean, this is how you get your day started. And this is just a structure you followed for years and years, and you come home, and it's like, that to you is complete chaos. But that to a normal family, that's normal. It's like, who cares about the dishes? Who cares? The kids are here. Like, this home is lived in. We'll clean it up later. We'll it's fine. But for me personally, that's, this is a very truthful scenario that I would come home and lose my mind, because the house ain't spotless, and things aren't in order, and cars dirty, and it just makes me cringe thinking about it. Even still, it's taken a lot of therapy and a lot of stuff to get to a point in life where it's whatever, it's okay, it's fine. But you don't get out of your world long enough to realize there's another world. We live in this one world, this box, that's full of negativity, that's full of bad things. Our job is literally going to people's worst day ever, every single call. So within 12 or 24 hour shift, you're either taking a terrible call or you're going to that terrible call. It's nonstop. That's what you do. That's your job. For your entire shift, that's what you're doing. So everything in your world is perceived terrible. Everybody's terrible. You can't trust anybody. People are crazy. That's just is. And you're going to these houses that are filthy. There's cat piss everywhere. It's terrible. It is awful to see what people are going through, how they live, why they live, how they live, hearing their family stories, hearing how they don't have any family, their kids don't take care of them, they don't have parents. It's horrible. It's all over the place. And we get stuck up in the middle of it. So when we go home, it's like, okay, here's my daily duties. I got to do this. I have to do that. I'm not living like these people's houses I go to at 3 o'clock in the morning. And this is what we do at the fire station every day. Dinner's at this time. We clean at this time. Blah blah blah. The trucks are full. They're clean. There's nothing laying around. It's spotless. That's how it is. That's how I live my life. And you expect your family to adhere to this chaotic world that you live in, and that don't work. That don't work. And you come home and lose your mind on your wife or your husband or your kids, and they're like, what is wrong with this person? We're just kids. We're just having a good time. We're doing the same thing that you did when you were a kid. You stayed up and played video games all night long. You played with your friends, and you got upset when you had to clean up. You weren't thinking about cleaning anything, washing a dish, or leaving something in the car. You didn't care about that, That was none of your concern. You just wanted to play and have a good time. So you learn, so if any of this kind of resonates with you, just know that you're not the only one. And I guarantee your family's not the only one that's like, what is wrong with this person? And you come home, make jokes and talk and pick on people, and they're like, that's not funny. That's not, you're a butthole. And that wasn't appropriate. And you're like, well, I'm just kidding, no big deal. But you can't talk to your family like you talk to your other first responder friends. They don't have the dark humor you have. They don't, you can't. They don't go do compressions and CPR on somebody, or see somebody's guts blown out, and then immediately 30 minutes after that, you're going back to the station eating dinner. They don't, and everything's normal. You're going back to the station eating supper, and you're going calling your wife or your husband, telling them good night, your kids, or you're doing whatever you're doing, and you just go to bed like, okay, ready for the next call. That's not normal. People don't do that. And when you come home with that dark humor and how you act at work, it's not normal. So, I've talked about several things, and I'll quit rambling. These are just several things that just come to mind to me this morning, and obviously it is very easy to take off with it because it's just so much. But so what I will say is, if you're experiencing any of this, what I've said in this conversation speaks to you volumes, even if it's one thing, just know that whether you have ADHD, whether you don't have ADHD, PTSD, all the alphabet soup, or even if you just work shift work, the consequences of shift work, sleep deprivation, we're not eating correctly, we normally don't exercise, we don't take care of ourselves, we're doing, if you're working first response, then obviously we're fixers, we are selfless people and not selfish people, and being selfish sometimes is a good thing, but even though we don't feel that way, but it's because that we don't take care of ourselves, and sometimes we don't recognize, this is what's going on with us, that our body wasn't built to handle cumulative stress. It wasn't, our fight or flight mode was not built to be put on cruise control. Our world is not supposed to be negative. It's not. Everything isn't bad, and everybody isn't bad. And, all these things, if you're affected at all by it, then you don't have a problem per se, but you just have a result of the life that you live. It's not, if you're working first response, the fire department, EMS, law enforcement, whatever, it's not your job necessarily. That's the problem, right? I'm not telling you to go out here and get a new job, but what I am telling you is, the longer that you stay in a high stress environment and shift work like we do, then if you do not recognize these signs and symptoms and don't adequately take care of yourself and de-stress, do things to calm yourself down and get you off this high health in a healthy way, to cope in a healthy way, and not drink or all the things that come with coping with an addiction, an unhealthy lifestyle. Again, your body is a machine that was made to function in a certain way, and any time that you make a machine function in a way that it was not intended to function, it's going to short circuit. The parts are going to come unglued. It's going to break down. The computer system's not going to function correctly. You know, it's just like taking water and splashing it inside of an electrical panel. It's just going to spaz out, and it's okay for a couple of years maybe, you know, but eventually your body's going to get wore out, and you're going to have a high cortisol level. You're going to gain weight. You're not going to be able to sleep, and all these things as a result of having an unhealthy lifestyle turns into other problems. You know, it increases your chance of heart disease, all kinds of things. And you know, there's a reason that first responders have a 70% divorce rate. There's a reason that we die of suicide more than line of duty death. And if you're a regular person, you don't work emergency services, and you work shift work, or maybe you were in the military, maybe you work healthcare, maybe you work VOC, maybe you have your lifestyle is similar. This happens to you as well. Again, our bodies was not made to do this. Our bodies was made to be with people, not be negative, to get adequate sleep and adequate exercise and nutrition. And if it doesn't get those things, it's not going to be good. So just look into those things. I will talk about all those things. My intentions with this is to make a series and just deep dive in all these things, and hopefully at a certain point have guests, maybe in a podcast form interview, and you can hear exactly what I'm talking about. Have some professional expertise proof aside from somebody who just went through it. All right, well, y'all have a great day, and I'll talk to you later.